Muted. All right, I'd like to call to order the special study session of October 30th, 2024 at 3 p.m. And I will kick it over to Jason and Cassandra to run with it.
Perfect. We'll get Jeff to share the screen here and we'll get going. So this is kind of the culmination of our budget. This is the last big budget meeting we're going to have. And then from here on out, it's procedural with any minor changes that council may want to amend the final document to, as well as a couple public hearings. So we'll go ahead and get started. Maybe it was off. I didn't know this thing turned on. All right. You know where we're at. All right. You guys have seen that slide a lot. All right. So tonight we're going to go over changes from the preliminary budget to the final. When we say preliminary budget, this is the document that we handed you the end of September, first part of October. We're going to go over some labor changes, revised estimates. We're also going to review the financial forecast for the general fund. We're going to revisit our revenue toolbox. Then we're going to talk about items that need further consideration. These are either items that, these are all items that were either underfunded or they were unfunded by the executive department. However, we still felt that they were worthwhile for further discussion because they're all worthy. It's just, there's only so many resources to go around. And then also some items that you all proposed over the last 2 months. All right, so some changes from preliminary to final. First one up is a transfer out of the general fund balance and a transfer in to, that's capital, right?
It's the Parks Capital
Parks
Fund.
Capital Fund of $300,000. This allocates $300,000 for Lucy V. Ryan Park improvements. That way it is in the budget, and this is, if you remember that $300,000 is the same amount that we spoke about over the summer with how much we anticipate demolition to cost, but it's also the same amount that if the private groups raise funds that we committed to donating.
When do they have to let you know how much they've raised? Are you sticking with December 1st, or is that was that just that initial agreement?
Well, council didn't pass any formal agreement, resolution. December 1st was the date in that. But you know, the comp plan will be approved, or it's slated to be approved on January 6th. So if there's activities going on and they are listening to this meeting, I would encourage them to reach out to us as soon as possible to start having discussions if they've raised $2 million.
Okay.
The next one is a couple weeks ago, we learned that our police interview room software was at end of life. We had an option to extend the warranty on it for 2 additional years, but they've been having some difficulties with it uploading to the prosecutor's office. So what we are proposing is actually to upgrade this to a Axon interview room. Axon is the same manufacturer that does our body-worn cameras. So it integrates seamlessly into the evidence.com platform, which then is easily shared with prosecutors and other court systems that need to review it. Development services fees. So when we last looked at the revenues for development services or building permit fees, we looked at 2023. You might recall 2023 was a very low year when it came to development activity. So we raised, the budget previously included a small lift on that 23 revenue. We have far exceeded that in 2024. And we're actually meeting our original budgeted forecast for 2024. So recognizing that, we are recommending increasing the development service fee revenue, not to where it is at 2024, but a midpoint between 23 and 24. We know there's still quite a bit of volatility in the development world, and we don't know if interest rates are going to continue to drop, which may spur development, or who knows what's going to happen in the next 2 years.
So those numbers are the difference between the original and the current. Those are the adjustments. Right?
Yeah. Electric, gas, and utility tax. This is a decrease of about of $711,000 a year. This goes back to the tax rebate that council passed back in September. If Puget Sound Energy originally gave us an estimate of what revenue would be brought in, and they have revised that considerably down. So it went from about $970,000 a year down to $220,000 a year. And I'll go into that more in the next slide here in just a moment. And the last one is a change to street repairs and maintenance for chip sealing. We had it in the budget at a 15-year cycle, which is an increase to the biennial cost. That was actually cut by the executive department to be consistent with what we've done in previous bienniums, but that amount only gets you a 30-year cycle. So on the utility taxes, this is the revised data that we got from Puget Sound Energy, and this is based on utility accounts between July of 22 and June of 23. And if you use that data, and of course these have probably changed a little bit since then, you'll have 10 electric customers impacted by the abatement change and 2 gas customers. Essentially, you have to have a $22,100 utility bill per month per utility. So $22,000 electric, $22,000 gas to be impacted by this abatement change that the council passed in September. So very small number of businesses.
So that's revised down from like 150 down to like quite a lot less people, less customers.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the city is one of them. Is that correct?
We are not actually.
Yeah. Okay.
No. I would be guessing at who these customers are, but we do have some larger manufacturers in the city that are probably make up at least part of the 10. But our largest electric and gas
The treatment plant.
is the treatment plant, and we don't hit this. We don't hit $22,000 a month. Other changes when you look on the salary and wages side, we talked to the Finance and Personnel Committee due to the retirement of the Police Support Services Manager, as well as some increased demand on our records department. We are adding a full-time records specialist 1 in the police department. This is the lowest level police records specialist. But we're also adding the evidence duties to that position. Previously, the evidence duties were done by our Police Support Services Manager. And really that is not something that's typically done by a mid-manager. That's usually done by a lower paid employee. The benefit to also putting this in records is there's a lot of commonality between the police records and the evidence. There's a lot of cross things that need to happen as far as distribution to prosecutors and whatnot, and also closing cases out at the end. So they'll be doing part-time evidence and then part-time record specialist work. We adjusted the wastewater treatment plant labor to include a second part-time seasonal. This was included in their collective bargaining agreement. We intended to hire 2 in 2024, but we could only find 1. So when we pulled the labor numbers forward to build this biennial budget, it only grabbed 1 position, so we missed that second one. We also included the adopted 2025 compensation schedule. Didn't have much of a change. We did do some reclassifications to some of our employees assigned to the engineering department and public works. And a lot of that's tied to additional responsibilities and also certification. So as you work through the engineering or construction management job duties and responsibilities, there's certifications that you get that equal usually more compensation because you're getting more responsibilities. We also accounted for staffing changes. So for example, the biggest one here is we had Ann Siegenthaler, who was here the other night. She retired. Well, she was a senior planner. She got replaced by Krishanda Walker, moved from development services to CD. Well, she's an associate planner, so there's a cost savings there. And then when we replaced Krishanda in development services, we hired an entry-level assistant planner. So there's salary savings at each one of those moves. On the benefits side, we incorporated the medical cost share at 3% in 25 and 5% in 26. We also updated all of our estimates for our medical increases, LNI, PFML, et cetera. So there's a lot of other things that are set by the state that we don't get until late third quarter. So we have to update those later in the budget process. All right. Oh, also, we had a number of employees as we go through the year, it's not uncommon for employees to have children, dependents age out, marriages, divorces, other life changes that change the makeup of our medical coverage. So we trued that up as well. Turn over to Sandra.
So after we incorporate all of the various changes, so it's the changes in both the line items and then the updated labor matrix for 2025-26, we update the general fund financial model as well, so that we're bringing that up. With that, we can see if we look down these columns at the proposed 2025 and 2026, we can see that with these changes over the biennium, we have roughly an $860,000 revenue over our operating expenditures. So we are meeting our council policies of covering our operating expenditures with our operating revenues, and then having, I don't want to use the word surplus because it's really not, because we have so many other unfunded needs that aren't being met. But we have an availability of appropriation of about $600,000 comfortably, leaving a little bit as a cushion in order for council to take a look at some of those underfunded and unfunded items and make some determinations moving forward. That does take into account, if you look in 2025 column, you'll see at right on the midpoint that allocating the city council reserve, that is construction for the Washington Street improvement. And then under that, that $300,000 for use of fund balance, that is for the line item that we added in for the Lucy B. Ryan Park line item in 2025. So 2025, 2026 is structurally balanced. We have our operating revenues covering our expenditures. When we start looking in the out years, really looking to where those lines cross when we're no longer structurally balanced, the 27-28 biennium combined is structurally balanced. But beginning in 2028 is where we see those lines start to cross, where we start seeing our operating expenditures outstrip our operating revenues. Before we reach that point, we want to be sure that we have a plan in place so that we are not putting ourselves in the position of constantly looking at our existing fund balance reserves to cover that shortfall. We've talked for a lot of years about the revenue toolbox. There are, some options out there. There are a lot of policy discussions to be made, and we want to be sure that we're kind of looking forward and having that on the radar and having those discussions before we get into, 2027, and we don't want to start having those conversations then. So funding the priorities, you've seen this slide before. This slide is great. We have a lot of unfunded and underfunded needs, and that goes really throughout all of our departments, from public safety to parks, community services, really runs through all of our general fund and frankly all of our capital funds as well. The value of the projects and our plans and wishes far outstrips what we have available in our resources. And then even further than that, it far outstrips what we have in our available resources that's discretionary. And so that we're talking about things that are not labor related. Anytime we start looking at labor as a discretionary change, we are talking about levels of service. And then as well as state and federal mandates that we really don't have any discretion over. Our financial toolbox, this is a slide that we have had in place for several biennia. It's always nice to look back and see where we are and what we've been able to do since then. Level of service changes, initially years ago, the idea was cutting services, but instead we see that life adds additional services. There's constant, ever increasing demand for a variety of services and needs that puts cities really right there at the forefront. Increasing our revenue sources. Increased revenue is great. Oftentimes increasing revenue also has an offset. It's has an increased demand on services as well. And we're finding that it's not so easy as just creating a new slice of revenue pie. There are a lot of competing demands. There's also a lot of mandates that kind of restrict what we're able to do. We've spent the past at least 2 decades looking for efficiencies in our changes of service. We've taken advantage of a lot of them. There's really not any low hanging fruit any longer, and really there's not even any high hanging fruit. I think Carmen Palmer made an excellent analogy that we've not only picked the fruit, we've shaken the tree. You know, there's just not a whole lot there. Increasing taxes and fees. Some of those are easier said than done. We've you know, looked at some of our, not easy because increasing taxes is never an easy proposition, but we've looked at some that we had available to us. For instance, the 1% increase to sales tax, utilizing our bank capacity in sales tax, the abatement that we just did on the Puget Sound Energy, or I should say on the electric, telecommunications and natural gas fees. And then having the council policy that as much as we possibly can, we want to use one-time revenues to cover one-time expenditures. We don't ever want to be in the position where we have to use a one-time revenue to cover our operating or our daily expenses. So when we look at our operating revenues, the first one, I think this is a strategic decision that council made several years ago, and that's to begin creating that city council strategic reserve. It was approved in fall of 2017, and it began with tax year 2018. This is a set amount that is earmarked out of our property tax levy for city council to appropriate during a budget cycle or through the budget amendment process. It's reauthorized annually with the ad valorem property tax levy resolution. You'll actually see over in the chart when I gave a balance at 12/31/2025, I didn't take that out to 2026 because that is something that's authorized annually, and I didn't want to make assumptions for 2026. And again, these funds accrue until they're allocated through the budget or the amendment process. I think it's been used very thoughtfully and astutely. Began accruing in 2018. $1 million was used in 2021 for the Woonor project. City Council authorized $300,000 to be used for Heritage Park. That's for some interim amenities. And then for design and construction of the Washington Street improvements. That will leave a balance at the end of 2024. So this is before Washington Street construction of $1,040,381. And then in 2025, we'll bring in an additional $350,000 through the property tax levy, and then outlay $970,500, which will leave a balance at the end of 2025 of roughly $420,000 that's available for allocation. Another tool in our toolboxes is, again, taking a look at our utility taxes. RCW sets the limit for most utility taxes at 6%. However, there is no statutory limit on utility taxes on water, sewer, and stormwater. That's something that can be set administratively. We have set ours, and it's been set at 6%, kind of match the other utilities for quite some time. We are on the low end, looking at some of our neighbors. We range from 6% all the way up to 12%. For each percentage point that we could increase our utility tax on water, sewer, and stormwater, could provide right around $160,000 annually to the general fund, and that's based on 2023 rates. So that is always an item in the toolbox. Consider it has its pros and cons. The pros are it's relatively easy to implement. It's by council action. It really doesn't require any other staff capacity to implement. It's something that we do internally anyway, so it's just changing the calculation. But of course, there is an impact on the customers, and that's always really kind of at the forefront of our revenue decisions. Other things in our toolbox that we've talked about, a business and occupation tax. This can be charged on gross receipts, square footage. There's any number of ways to do a B&O tax as long as it's uniformly applied across business categories. It should also support those projects that are paying into it. A B&O tax is complicated. This is probably the most simplistic slide that we have because it really is, it would require a fair amount of study to implement. It would also require additional staffing beyond what we currently have in order to manage and audit it and do it well. A transportation benefit district, this is something that staff has been looking at. It can be used to fund roads, sidewalks, transit, covering both construction, so capital, and maintenance and operation costs. The RCW gives a couple of different ways to do a transportation benefit district. You can have a sales tax that's up to 0.1%, which is council managed, so that's non-voted, that's imposed by the council. Anything over that would need to be voter approved. Alternatively, a TBD can be imposed through a vehicle license fee. And there are certain dollar amount restrictions on that. Looking at a transportation benefit district, the mechanism has its pros and cons. Sales tax, you are essentially you are tasking anyone who is purchasing in the city to help support the road and the street infrastructure. Vehicle licensing, it's not a complicated thing to implement, but the people that are paying for it aren't necessarily always going to be the people that are providing the impact on your roads. So there's some trade-offs and pros and cons there to be thoughtful of. Transportation benefit districts have been around for quite some time. A lot of our neighbors have already implemented a TBD. So looking down the line, just some very preliminary estimates. If Sumner were to impose a 0.1% council managed transportation benefit district, we could realize roughly about $800,000 annually. That would be dedicated towards street funding. So that would have to be used on either street capital or street maintenance and operations. Local improvement districts are always a funding option for very, very targeted projects. These finance capital improvements that are very specific to a geographic area. So we're talking about a certain street, a certain neighborhood, something that can be very geographically finite. It can be utility or general improvements. The city finances those improvements upfront and then goes through an assessment roll process and imposes an assessment on the benefiting property owners that is paid back over a period of a set number of years. 136 in Valentine was our last LID. We have two existing, both 136 in Valentine as well as utility improvements on Stewart Road.
Any questions before moving to the next section?
Yes. So on the utility tax, so each percentage point is $160,000
Combined,
combined.
yes.
Okay, so if you went 2 points, it'd be 320. And then how much, just roughly, would this impact each customer if we did that? Have you kind of looked at that to give the range,
Give it an average.
Yeah, the
Jeff, I
average.
know you talked about that. Do you want to come up here actually and?
Come on, Jeff. Love to.
Look at him run up here.
You had to choke that out.
That was fast.
It sounded good.
So I mean, if you say a typical residential bill, $100 to $150 a month, you're talking 2% increase, a couple bucks a month. Fairly nominal, I think.
What about the, like, industrial area? I mean, just a range.
Yeah, that's where it's gonna add up, and I don't know, on the big side, we have some monthly utility bills that are in the several $1,000s. So,
Is it something that, I mean, do other cities have this? So I mean, is it gonna be, like, if I was running a large business, I would look around and I'd look at the cost of moving, I'd look at the cost of the fees, I'd look at the impact, of disrupting my employee base. So I'm sure you guys look at that stuff. So even if they have an impact, is it reasonable still that they would stay, you think, just because other cities might do the same thing?
When you're looking at this information, Bonnie Lake is at 12%,
Yep.
Puyallup is at 10%.
Auburn's up there at about 11-ish, 10 and a half.
So we're on the low end, so we're still economically attractive.
Fife might be the only place people might run to, but then you gotta think about picking that business up and moving, which is
Yeah.
always hard.
I think that's the exact point. Is it gonna be enough to make somebody pick up a business
Right.
and move?
I don't think so.
it's a combination of all the things,
Right.
property taxes, utility rates, utility taxes.
Okay, so if we look at their average bill, so if it's a couple bucks for like me, what might it be for them? 2%? I mean, if you just averaged what you think some of
Yeah,
those
it could
are.
be, you know,
1,000?
I would say, like in the $100 a
$100?
month on the high end.
That's it? Oh, okay.
And this is a 6%, that's what the tax rate is, that's not the annual increase in.
The current tax rate is 6%, and
Yes.
then the Councilwoman's question would be, what if we took that to 8% and added
Right.
on an additional 2%?
Right, I was just trying to figure it, it's one of those things of, if you look at it, I mean, even if you took it to 10%, I doubt people would start moving out of the industrial area.
I think one thing to remember too is the nice thing about a utility tax is as you increase your rates annually, for the consumption and base fees, this grows with it.
Right,
Right.
Yeah, so it's kind of inflation proof.
Yeah.
right,
Which is nice.
all right, thank you.
Have we stayed at 6% for quite a while? It hasn't moved.
Yeah, we have been, I think since I've been here, we've been at 6% for water and sewer. Initially, we were not at 6% for stormwater, and then we included 6% on stormwater several years ago. But it's been like this probably 10 years at least, if not more.
It's been like this, so I've been here for 12 years and it's been like that my entire term.
We have an employee that lives in South King County and he has some utility tax rates that are north of 15.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure.
So, they are out there. This is the weird one, 'cause it's what's reasonable.
Okay.
What about what I heard it called was door tax? Because since I've been working here, it's the trucks. I mean, they just, wherever they go, they tear up, so, a lot of maintenance.
So door tax is a form of business and occupation tax, and I don't know if they're even allowed. A couple cities tried to do a door tax and it didn't pass the smell test. Now, what other cities have done if you think about the Kent Puyallup Valley, right? This is where a lot of our distribution warehouses are. They've done a combination of gross receipts B&O tax. They've also done square footage. So they've set a square footage, say anything over 20,000 square feet pays, 6 cents a square foot a year. Talking to other cities, they find that's easier to manage because you're not having to audit gross receipts, but it's still staff time to track down and make sure people are paying it, which can be a challenge at times. One of the questions we get asked from an economic development standpoint quite often is, do you have a B&O tax? And we always love saying no, because it is a huge benefit. But then you also have those that are saying, well, kind of wish you had one so I could write it off, so I could, negotiate with you on why I want to move here. Maybe you'll waive my B&O tax, things of that nature. So, pros and cons to it. But to Cassandra's point, if you collect the B&O tax, you need to then take that revenue and should support projects in that area. So if you were to do one on square footage, let's say, you'd want to take that revenue from that and make sure it goes to maintain like the roads up there, for example. We were incredibly fortunate, about 3 or 4 years ago now, to get 142nd repaved with federal dollars in one fell swoop. If we had not gotten that federal grant, we'd be doing it in 7 to 8 phases is what we estimate. It would have been, as soon as you finish that 8th phase, you know what, it's time to start
Back to number one.
back at the beginning. But that road's not gonna last forever. We're gonna have to do something eventually again to it.
So can you explain to me the B&O tax that the Main Street Association is running through there, or they're getting some of that benefit? And I just don't understand the whole program.
Sure. So that's state B&O tax. That's not local B&O
Okay,
tax.
so that's where the difference is.
So the Main Street program allows a business to say, I'm just gonna use round numbers. I pay $10,000 a year in state B&O tax. Well, instead of paying the state $10,000, I'm gonna give Main Street $5,000, okay? And that $5,000 goes to Main Street to help support their operations. Sumner Main Street can collect 200, low 200s amount per year in this type of credit. The following year, that business that gave $5,000 gets a 75%, pays 75% of whatever they were going to owe, so they get a little bit of a discount.
So you're just saying that we don't have a city B&O?
The city B&O tax. All of our businesses are paying state B&O.
Okay.
Good clarification. Thank you.
Can I ask a question. So we're talking about extra revenue sources, but we're also looking at a budget where we have a little bit of a surplus the next couple of years. So are we talking about like 2029, 2030? Is that what- is that what we're-
2027, maybe?
So, thank you, Annie, you're kind of leading right in my next discussion point here. We have some unfunded and underfunded items, okay, coming up. And yes, we have, we have some extra operating revenue that we can allocate this year. And as council goes through an exercise in a few minutes, we want you to be cognizant of, looking really at the 600,000 as more of a one-time revenue, right? If you were to allocate it, let's say, to street maintenance, which is definitely something that our community has asked for, there's no long-term funding stream to continue that. So you're going to be in a position in 28 or 29 to reduce those services again, unless you identify new revenue to pay for that. So it's better, from our opinion, that you look at more one-time expenditures than ongoing reoccurring to address in these unfunded or underfunded items, unless you're willing to talk about new revenue. And we don't expect council to make a decision on new revenue right now, but we're setting the stage where you need to start thinking about new revenue sooner than later. Because these lines are going to cross unless you're willing to cut services drastically. And cutting services could be, we're not gonna do more sidewalks, we're not gonna do chip seal. We're gonna reduce staff, whether it's police or parks or, it's those types of things. Plus, there's a lot of things that we're not even talking about tonight. You went and toured the parks. There's no long-term park capital identified anywhere in this budget. And those are things that are not scoring well on grants. Because it's so limited grant funding available. It's very, very competitive.
Where's the 600,000 up there? I'm trying to see it. I'm not, help
Yeah,
me.
so if you look at 25 and 26, we have about $860,000 of resources available.
Uh-huh.
You could go all the way up to that 860-ish. We would recommend that you leave some on the table
Okay,
because we don't know what's gonna happen in
Right.
the next 2 years, right? So it's always good to leave a little bit of cushion. That's our recommendation. You guys can.
so the 600's in the 855?
Yeah.
Okay, thanks. I was looking, I'm thinking, what are they doing that math at? I'm just not doing that math.
It's really 860 because it's the 4275 plus the 850.
Yeah. Yeah, once he went there, I thought, oh, I can do some, now I can do some
It's hidden-
simple
it's
math,
hidden
but
to
until
them.
then, I was like, where is that 860 or is that 600? Okay, got it.
So where's that? I know on some of the stuff you provided, I think the transportation one, to me, one of the biggest needs is transportation. So on that chart, that one, you provided what other cities are doing it, but I also was interested in if we looked at what other sales tax rates are compared to other cities, because I feel like we have a lot of car dealerships. So if the sales tax rate here is 9.5, then I think people are gonna come here. There's a few people, not everybody, but I think that generates a little bit more if we're different. I'm looking at Pierce County, I think their sales tax rates as high as like 10.3 in Tacoma, it looks like.
Mhm.
And then we're at 9.5?
Yeah.
So if we look at the surrounding areas, how do we compare to that list? Is there a way to?
What Puyallup just go up to your point?
Helps at 10.1. Their job is currently,
Contemplating going to 10.2.
yeah, they are considering a
And it's a big,
8.1%
It's a big deal.
TBD.
oh, it is a big
I've heard a
thing.
lot of people,
Oh, lots of council meetings, it's
Yeah.
not pretty.
yeah, it's not, because they'll lose
Mhm.
those car dealerships.
Yeah.
And once again, that's a good
Sorry.
point. Let's think about this. Does 0.1% or even 1% make a difference on where you purchase a car? Some might argue yes, some might argue no. RTA is another thing, and remember, car sales tax is different than what we're talking about here. Car sales tax is already higher
You're paying an extra 0.3%.
automatically on car tax. And cars are unique too, because cars are not destination-based sales tax, right? Normally, you order something from Amazon, you get delivered to your house here in Sumner, Sumner gets that sales tax. If you drive to Puyallup and buy that car, even though you live here, Puyallup gets that sales tax. We benefit, obviously, if somebody comes and buys a truck at Sunset, or, we get that benefit. So, yeah, it's real, it's something to consider. I know a lot of people that go outside the RTA to buy a car, right? Because of the RTA taxes that you get assessed.
Like the top 3 or 4 of our sales tax come from the car dealerships. Is it because of that 0.3% extra, or does that help?
I don't know that the sales tax rate is a huge factor
It's just
locally, honestly. I think people look more at who has the car that they want.
Yeah, it's probably just as important, the relationship and whether you think you're getting a deal or not getting a deal, right? I think someone in Puyallup is gonna give me a deal versus someone in Sumner, even if they've got higher sales tax, it might pay off for me to go over there and buy it. Other people, it's kind of the feeling and then transaction, and they wanna establish a relationship, so maybe they'll buy from the dealer where they live, because that's where they're gonna go back and they're gonna service their vehicle, and they think that they're gonna take care of me later if I bought from them in the first place. So it's difficult, it's one of the factors. Sales tax definitely matters to some, but it's not the only factor in a car buying transaction, because it's big money, right? So.
I'm just looking at that, I mean, if you look at the next couple of years and everything and all the different funding differences, that if we're looking at what's the need for the funding, I think streets are probably one of the top ones. I mean, we got these 2 projects we're looking at, Hunt Street and Washington we're doing, and there's gonna be a couple more, I think, coming up. So to me, the street funding to fix those streets is a pretty significant deal. And I think the people that are impacted by sales tax, I think you actually tax people outside the city when they come and use our stuff, in addition to people who live here. And it's also, to me, if you're on a fixed income, the sales tax is just it's a lot easier to handle on a fixed income. So I think you're looking at people who are tight on their budget, and I think that the utility taxes hurt them more, property taxes hurt them more. And I think that since we're not only lower than other cities nearby, because we're not in the Pierce Transit, I think mainly, I think to me that's the smallest impact for the biggest return is that 1% councilmanic one, so that 1/10 of a percent, I guess. Because I don't think it changes anything from a business perspective, doing business here, and I think it doesn't hurt anybody who's fixed income. And it brings in enough money to work on a specific thing that's really one of the biggest things that I think we need to be focused on. I'd say to me, like, police and streets are probably the 2 top priorities that I have, so.
It's interesting you bring up police and public safety. Councilmember Elfers at Gig Harbor, they were facing quite a large budget shortfall. So they went back to their voters and they got the voters to approve the increase up to 0.3% on this, just so they could pay for their street maintenance with a transportation benefit district, which then freed up other general fund dollars for public safety. So the intended use of this is for streets. You know, you have to use it for street type maintenance and capital projects. The benefit is much greater than that because it frees up potentially other portions of the general fund. It's a council decision to do that, but yeah, it's potentially.
Okay, so the $800,000 amount, does that apply if we decided on the $20 vehicle license fee? That would still get up or to 800,000?
That is just the sales tax.
That's just, okay.
You can actually do both. Gig Harbor had both for a couple of years.
Vehicle license fees, the one we voted on not to have, so I feel like I'm like sneaking that in there.
Yeah, and a lot of places are talking about it right now, lowering it or getting rid, because there's a lot of controversy.
Yeah, because that was.
All
what we
these
voted
cities
on.
that have it, the UP, Ording and DuPont are all looking, changing it because it is, but that's one way to, I guess, get more revenue. But I'm not saying I'm in favor of that, because I'm not. I'm just saying there are issues with it, and it's causing a lot of angst in some cities that have only had it a few years.
One advantage of sales tax over a licensing fee is it really then is applied evenly to everybody who visits our community, not just lives here. When you think about our manufacturing industrial center, we have a lot of people that work there that might go to Fred Meyer afterwards or go to McClendon's or buy lunch, right? They're doing commerce in our city, but their vehicle is registered in Parkland or Spanaway or Puyallup, right? So if they don't register their car here at night, the tab fee doesn't do much, right? Doesn't spread it out as broadly.
Anybody else?
I was just gonna say that then we have how many people that register their car here and then working elsewhere. We probably have equally that amount or more.
Any other questions?
Okay, let's get into these items. So, as we go through these, what staff did to try to help guide this conversation, we put them in packages. And as we go through an exercise here in a few minutes, you don't necessarily have to, if you said, well, I like City Hall windows, but I don't like painting City Hall. You don't have to fund both. You could just say, I want to fund one or the other. But for discussion purposes, we put them in what we call packages. After we go through this, we're gonna give you some time on your own, 10 minutes or so, to go through a budget exercise, which has all these different things on here. You to kind of select what you think should be funded. If you want to dip into any fund balance or council strategic reserves to do something, you can indicate that on that form. We'll take a few minute break. We'll collate your responses and then we'll have a discussion over where do we see some commonalities and how do we move forward. Okay, so first up is our facilities package. As you recall, we have failing windows all upstairs that need to be replaced. Also, this building has paint that was put on it in 1999. So it's definitely time to repaint this building and reseal our bricks. The windows, our estimated cost is $500,000. Right now, we have $500,000 sitting in our building reserve fund. One option would be to sweep that and put it towards this project. However, we know that we have some other needs in the city. When we look at the senior center, for example, we applied for a grant, a CDBG grant, to get the partitions replaced because they're broken and are no longer really safe to operate. We're hopeful that we'll get that grant. We think we've scored well, but it's still not approved yet. But if we don't get that grant, that work still needs to be done. And that's about $240,000. So leaving that in the building reserve fund gives us some identified funding if we needed to dip into to grab that. Plus it doesn't sweep it completely. Okay. As a reminder, we got broken windows, windows that don't seal. Unfortunately, it's not just the windows, it's all the casings around it are rotting out because they haven't been maintained. Any questions about the facilities
On the
package?
windows, you said upstairs, is it also down, is it the whole building?
There's some in the police department that will need it, and then it's pretty much
Downstairs.
all upstairs, yeah.
Trying to wrap my head around 500 covered every window in the building or just?
Almost every building. There's some windows that we've replaced over the last few years that won't need it, but like these don't need it necessarily in here. But if you go down that way, like in the back of the police department, some of their administrative offices, they need new windows.
Carmen has exploding windows.
Mhm.
I do. I promise you, I did not punch that. I was just working along.
I knew I was
And
there.
it just did that. I wish I knew how, because I have 24 others that might just pop at any moment.
Scary.
So I have two questions. I was curious on that. So there's is that something we'd have to do all at once, the whole 500,000? And because if you're like, hey, these windows are worse than others or whatever, that's my first question. Second question is, why hasn't there been maintenance on the ones that are rotting? How do we make sure that doesn't happen if we fix it and we don't maintain it? Is obviously gonna.
So all comes down to funding priorities. And previous councils have not seen building maintenance as a priority. They didn't have it a building reserve until we raised property taxes. So, I mean, this is, I'm gonna be pretty honest, this is policy decisions that have been made over the last 20 years that have delayed maintenance on our facilities that have caused us more grief and money today.
And we have dealt with some windows as we have done various remodels and building of offices, often incorporated replacement of windows, new windows. But anything that's kind of been untouched is still like that.
Well, I think something that didn't help it, so if you go back to that picture, that's a stress fracture. I hate to, I'm not gonna go into the detail on why I know about windows. But that's a stress fracture and it probably had something to do with all the pounding.
I wondered from the, yeah.
No, I'm serious,
Yeah.
because things are
While
settling,
driving,
so.
The glass, people said it was so crammed in there, they even had trouble getting it out even as it was shattered.
It's a stress fracture.
I promise you I did not punch it because I needed a good picture and it wasn't the stress coming from me.
So, I mean, there's one, but it could be more now with cold weather coming in, so
So do we need to replace them all at once? No, but
it's just gonna get more
you have all
expensive.
these casings around here. Do you really wanna paint a casing that looks like that?
No,
And if you're gonna replace the casing, you might as well pop that window out at the same time. Otherwise, you're gonna replace the casing, take it off later, put a new window in. So,
so did I see on that prior slide, so it was 340,000 out of it right there, so it's a one-time 500,000. Funding source could be 340 from the building reserve, so would it be 160 out of the general fund?
we should hand this out, cause this is, they can follow along.
Good,
with
because
this.
that's
Yeah,
what I
that'd
wrote
be
down, I
Yeah.
thought, so I'm, okay.
So if you went to the AWC budget training, this is gonna look very familiar. So,
I have a question on the painting.
Yeah.
Since it's a brick building, it's mostly just trim,
Just the
but it's
ceiling.
also sealing the brick.
Yeah.
sealing the brick, so we have brick along this entryway, but the rest is all paved.
Yeah.
And doors,
Perfect.
our doors are in pretty bad shape, especially if you look at the main front door to
Yeah.
City Hall. It's peeling and flaking, it's a coat of paint.
But not new doors, right? You're just like
Just
painting.
paint.
Probably should have been painted 5 years ago.
Okay. So can we just use this as we go through?
You can fill it out as you go through. And you'll be ahead for your independent study period.
For my test?
Make notes as you go.
All right, next thing up is our parks package. So this includes CCTV cameras at Siebenthaler, Rainier View, and Loyalty Park. And this helps hopefully be a deterrent to vandalism, but also allows us to maybe capture some of that vandalism and provide aid in criminal prosecution. So that is there. Next thing up is autonomous mower and the Bill Heath Sports Complex tennis and pickleball court restriping. On the autonomous mower, I know Councilmember Alfred, you asked about lease. So the top part of this graph is what you've seen before. It's the return on investment is about 3.75 years. If we go to a lease, you can see the company offers a 24-month and a 36-month lease, which, surprise, surprise, is about the cost of the mower. The pros of a lease, obviously you get the latest technology because it will change. However, don't forget, most of this is software driven and you're gonna have a software component that's upgraded every year anyway. So be any really technology that changes on the mower itself or that is not compatible with whatever software improvement that they just made. The cons, the one con we found was the estimated lifespan of a purchase is 8 to 10 years versus a 36-month lease,
When does it pay for itself?
3.75 years.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Next up is what we're calling the community services package. This is cameras at the mausoleum as well as the senior center. So the mausoleum, we've had some vandalism inside. Also had some people sleeping inside the mausoleum, so it just helps with added security. The reason why that's not up in the parks package is the mausoleum is a facility at our cemetery. Also, this is a more complex installation because it's not, think of the mausoleum, it's a standalone building. It doesn't have internet service. We have to get internet to it to power the camera. And then the senior center, the purpose of senior center cameras is really to record the main entrance and the exterior, where you pull up and park. We have had, this is more of a risk management tool. We have had trips and falls out there, so getting them on video may aid us in that. Next up is Sidewalk Capital. You might recall from the Public Works presentation at the beginning of October, we have a portion of West Valley Highway sidewalks that are failing. They're falling into the storm ditch. Council did do a budget amendment to allocate money for design on this. However, we have not executed a contract yet because without identified capital, it may not be prudent to do design at this point. So,
Can I ask a question about that?
absolutely. Ryan, I know his question. Come on up, Ryan. You're gonna need to talk. So Ryan Johnstone, if you remember, Deputy Public Works Director.
You knew it was coming from me. So, because I've looked at those for the last 10 years.
Yeah.
Why can't we just move it over, like 3/4 of them sidewalks that are like that, and then just armor plate the wall and 30 grand, you're done? Why haven't we looked at that? Because I know I've brought it up several times.
Yeah, and to tell you the truth, without going out there and maybe looking at that a little bit more, I'm not sure I could answer that question for you. I do know at this point, though, those sidewalks, as well as in some areas, the adjacent
road's
roadway
coming down.
is all starting to go.
I'm just, again, until you can find big funds to do the road and everything. I've been out there and like I say, 3/4 of that sidewalks is against the curb, and you remove 2 or 3 trees and move it over there, and that would buy us time. If that's what we need in order to get big funds to fix everything. I'm just trying to get through for a while. I just.
Potentially, one of the things to consider is I think out there, because we're adjacent to some sensitive areas, no matter what work we do, we're gonna have to go down the permitting route as well, which kind of plays into this and whether we wanna have to do that multiple times to get this fixed permanently or not. I know that that's part of the puzzle. So something to consider.
I'm just thinking this actually pulls you away from those sensitive areas instead of still being in the sensitive area, even though you only have 3 foot, I think they're 3 foot there or something, or 4.
Roughly, I'd have to
And
take
then
a
that
look.
puts your sidewalk there, and then you don't touch that stuff.
And, what you mentioned there too, the idea that we could pull them away and add a wall, unfortunately, the cost of adding those types of
Well,
walls.
I was just thinking just armor plate on the one that's fallen in, that's all the way down by 24.
I don't know that that's gonna actually at this point be able to sustain us as long as we'd like it to. I
Okay.
think that we've moved beyond that point.
Okay. Okay, thanks.
Yeah, thank you.
Would that be sidewalks on both sides of West Valley Highway?
No, it's just on one side. It's along the eastern side of West Valley.
And it's 70 feet, 80 feet, piece?
Roughly.
5
Yeah.
foot each piece, so it's not a lot of sidewalk, it's mostly the failing of the material underneath.
Correct.
Okay, next up is Street Capital. This is Hunt Avenue. This is Hunt Avenue from West Main to State Street, which is the worst part of Hunt Avenue. As you might recall, Hunt Avenue has a failing base, so it's starting to fall apart. A lot of alligatoring, potholes, things of that nature. So this is the design and construction costs that council asked us to put together. As you can see, there's a portion of this general fund. There's also water, sewer, and storm funds associated with this project.
Go all the way, the whole length of Hunt Avenue.
No, this goes West Main to State Street. This is 2 blocks.
So we're looking at that, saying it's a one-time of 297 from I'm looking at the general fund. And here I'm trying to, is 128,
for general
304.
fund, yep. For the
There's no
design.
place else to get it? Is there any other way to get it?
No, this is a neighborhood street, right?
Correct.
Yeah,
Which are
over
not
there.
grant eligible.
I mean, it is bad,
It's like Washington, that,
it's bad.
so same reason why Washington doesn't qualify for grant funds, this street doesn't qualify for grant funds. So the only way that this street gets fixed is through our local dollars or some sort of development that occurs in the area that is required to upgrade the street to standards. Next up is street operations. So, a number of years ago, council set the goal of doing a 15-year chip seal cycle. As you recall, 15 years is kind of the magic number before the streets start degrading quickly. That cost to do that 15-year cycle was $250,000 a biennium, but now due to increased labor and material costs is now $250,000. It's really now $500,000 a biennium. So 250 is the delta between the two of those. You also might recall in this 23-24 biennium, we had an overlay program at $300,000. Those of you on council, when we talked about how much overlay you get for 300, it was pretty underwhelming, to say the least. There's a lot of factors gonna, but you don't get a whole lot out of it for 300. So this would create a small overlay program for $300,000 biennium. Next is a public safety package. We talked about the need for 800 megahertz radio communication during an emergency. If cell phones are down, as Mr. Johnstone experienced when he worked at a neighboring city, when they had the Sumner Grade Fire, they could not communicate. They were relying on their 800 megahertz radios. We do not have such radios here. The cost, this still needs quite a bit of review and thought put into it. This would be the cost for new radios at about $10,000 each, so about 10 radios. What it doesn't incur is the reoccurring charges, which next year are $32 a radio per month. So that's $320 if you had 10 of them. We do know that there are some used 800 megahertz radios that are going to be entering the secondary market as City of Tacoma recycles some of theirs. It might be a good opportunity to purchase some gently used radios that are still just not under manufacturer's warranty, but still functional. We could possibly get more than 10. This needs probably some more vetting before we move further on it, but it is a need that we do need to address at some point. Questions about radios?
Who would keep these? Are they police and public works type thing, or just the city's gonna?
They'd be used, we would strategically deploy them, so there'd be some at the
Different
treatment plant,
departments.
EOC, it'd be at the shops, administration. There's a lot of things that need to be worked out. You know, is there a frequency available?
We think realistically, probably 20 is the number we would need.
Yeah. And if you can buy them on the secondary market, they're not gonna be $10,000. So there is some advantage. Council had requested to evaluate accelerating the patrol officer from 26 to 25. Little update on where we're at with hiring right now. We have 2 conditional offers out, which would get us up to full staffing for this year. And we would have the 25 position, which is vacant. And then we anticipate 1 or 2 more leaving through attrition in 25. So that'd be 3 positions. If you accelerate the 26, that's 4 positions. We would do our best to fill it, but I can't guarantee we'd be able to fill it next year.
So we budget it, but it'd be hard to actually, like, likelihood of actually spending it would be lower, even if we put it in the budget. Is that what you're saying?
It all depends on the quality of applicants.
Can't guarantee.
There's no guarantee.
If we got,
Potentially.
yeah, if we got good ones, we would hire them. And I think
It gives you options.
Give us an
Doesn't
option.
really- Yeah.
Council also brought up increasing building reserves. You know, we talk about delayed maintenance. This was the primary cause, and no dedicated facility employee until 4 years ago. And then increased street match. I know Councilmember Elphers, you brought that up during property tax, increasing the amount of funds available for grant match. Any questions on those items that we just discussed? All right, so before you is this beautiful piece of paper. The way this works is you can recommend up to $600,000. You can then also add additional funds from either fund balance or strategic reserve, or from another source, which could be even just our operating excess that we have on the budget this year. And then on the back, if you need a refresher of the revenue options we talked about, there's a list of those. So what we'd like to do is take 5 minutes or so, work independently, we'll collect the sheets. Sandra will tally them up and then we'll have a discussion. Before we do that, we're actually doing fairly well on time. Looking at Andrea. What we could do after you'd finish this project, we could amend the agenda and move into an executive session that we have scheduled for later today, while Cassandra works. And by the time we get done with the executive session, everything will be ready to go and try to get you out of here as soon as we can today. If that works for you. So to do that, I do need a motion to amend the agenda to move the executive session up and then reconvene afterwards to finish the budget stuff.
Do we have a motion?
I'll make a motion, but I can't remember what he
That's
just
okay,
said.
we'll figure it out.
Do I have a second?
I second.
Second, okay, cool.
All in favor?
Got it?
Yeah, you need to take a vote.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes unanimous.
Enter like at 4:10, 15 into executive session.
Yeah.
Motion, but I don't know
We'll
what
give
he
you
said.
10 minutes to work through this and then we'll go into, we'll announce an executive session around 4:10.
So one question, we have to balance it?
Yeah,
Add it all up.
find more money.
That's hard.
Just spend the 600 or drag something
How much
somewhere?
is in the general fund balance? Can I just ask?
Yeah, let me go back to that. So you
Okay,
have it.
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
And really, I guess you don't have to balance it because you could spend less than the amount of money you have.
Yeah, you don't have to spend
But
it
I've
all.
already
You can't spend,
surpassed
you can't spend
600,000.
more.
Well, you can if you wanna drag it
How
from
much
somewhere.
is
So the ending fund balance is up at the bottom there. So in 25, the ending fund balance.
I got a chair in the way. 11,560
Yeah,
for 2025, 11,560.
11,560, 899.
And then the council strategic reserve,
At the end of 2005, it's roughly $420,000.
thank you.
And then if you make the assumption, again, it can't be guaranteed, but if you make the assumption that council will continue to authorize that through the property tax levy, that's $350,000 annually. So that would be the amount in 2026.
Okay.
Cassandra is a very tough grader, so make sure,
check it out.
make sure your penmanship is on point and that everything totals up correctly.
Come on.
And she'll be able to do it in her head too, so,
And do we have to sign our names?
yes, and dates.
Right on the bottom.
Fingerprints, please.
Yeah.
I did one.
Come on, Barb, you can't.
In my head, I have Excel.
If we did the lease, then you still have to be net saving.
Well, you can't put my name on it and say it's spent like $3 million.
How do you spell it again?
No,
The only savings to the lease is in about $5,000 over 3 years, but then year 4, you're gonna have to figure out how to, if you wanna buy another autonomous mower
But
or
I
not.
mean, you are providing, the worker who was doing that before, now is doing.
You're
something
gaining
else.
efficiency, but you're not necessarily saving money. We're not gonna
I see what you're saying.
eliminate an employee because we're buying the lawnmower, but they will be able to do other things.
You get more done.
yeah,
It is an efficiency.
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, it's an
So
efficiency.
does,
It's right here. It's 293 hours is our estimate for annual efficiency.
It's so hard, I'm just gonna throw this out there, it's so hard to do the quantification on efficiency plus your ROI, because people will just do things and it will become more efficient. So usually you have to start and then you can track your efficiency over a period of time, you know?
How do we like that idea? How do we put that on?
Just write lease and then the dollar amount that you want.
Oh, okay, so the full amount of lease,
Mhm.
not the monthly amount.
That's very exact. It's down to the penny.
I would pick 2 years since we're dealing with a 2-year budget. Doesn't mean we couldn't enter into a 3-year.
Always, that's on the letters.
It's all gone.
it's all money, it's only money.
Seepage.
Yeah, so it's
Like a round, right?
Yes.
I want pennies. complete, I'll take it and Sandra can get started. Thank you. Jeff, you want to stop the share?
You see that? Schools are getting run by most of the schools, like I know that. I'm sure.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, you can say Zoom is all the same.
Yeah. So. Now what happened? I could read it, but it's too weird.
Because he uncovered things too.
Really bad PR. So I do that.
That should.
Hopefully this makes sense. Ignore my math on the side, I suppose. Yes, I- Math plus that, out of that.
Perfect, thank you.
If we're done, can we take a break?
Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay. Good, how are you? Good. Spending money, you know.
Thank you.
So if I did it right, I think.
I'm sure it's
Set up
great.
Everything, so that's what I got left.
I'm sure it's great. Thank you.
Well, I don't know if it's great, but it's something.
That didn't work.
Thank you.
I think I'm within 10 cents.
Carpenter consulting.
I think 100 grand.
I'm gonna turn y'all into account.
Flip account.
100 grand. And amongst-
Alright.
Close enough. I'm only up to.
Executive session.
Yeah.
I'll put us in an executive session.
Okay. All right, we will adjourn for a special meeting executive session at 4:15. The time for the purpose of RCW 42.301101D to consider the selection of a site or the acquisition of real estate by lease or purchase when public knowledge regarding such consideration would cause a likelihood of increased price for a period of
Let's go 10 minutes.
10 minutes. And it is 4:15.
So we'll go into the other room, we'll leave the recording going in here, and we'll come back and then we'll reconvene budget discussion.
Okay.
Okay,
We're back.
bring us back at 4:28.
Thank you, council. Looks like y'all did a good job adding up. Sounds like
Well, we'll see. Let Cassandra be the judge of that.
I didn't have any tax in
Her,
the seat.
she's got smoke coming out of her. No.
it's just a minute.
Just the date and budget exercise. Caveat, I think I interpreted everything correctly. Please let me know if there's any changes. It'll just take a second to get that loaded up.
Sounds like the computer's cooperating.
Yeah. Control, alt, delete.
Jeez.
Unplug it.
know how Michelle
Change those bids, new computers.
Brian on that.
Jeff, do you just want me to join the teams and share?
Yeah, it's not recognizing the thumb drive.
That's right. Just a second, I can get them.
Cassandra, do you need the thumb drive back or you have it on your computer?
No, I have it on my computer, but can you send me an invite, because it's telling me that the meeting ID is expired.
It's because we get busy, right? We get busy. That's on it.
Just get a grease board
I've
out
done
and
that
some
once ago.
pins. Come on.
This is the
Old school
first
here in a
time.
minute.
It's like, darn.
Get the chart.
Well, you're
I
up to
couldn't even
snuff
pass.
now.
I couldn't even pass the test.
All this technology is saying it don't.
I'll see if I can get to it from the agenda.
It's because you have to remember all the prior answers.
Dang it, I didn't do that.
Oh, yeah. It's like, wow.
But I'm gonna be very careful in the future.
Mhm.
It was only 15, 20 minutes, but still.
I know, you'll never get that back in.
I got it.
Okay, you should be able to share your screen now.
Got it.
Where is it gonna go wonky now?
Pretty much.
I'm trying to make it a little bit better.
Do you wanna? Can you put it on one page and print? We can print the first 4 conference room. We'll print them real quick. Old school.
There you go.
Send it, I'll get them.
Oh, nice.
Sidewalk.
I don't have access to that conference room thing.
Email it to me. I do.
Cause that's the same as you buy, I fly.
Printer down
There is one in our office,
Mm-hmm.
Just print upstairs,
Where?
open up.
council office. There's a printer.
There's a printer in the council.
Yeah.
Yeah, and a computer.
One on the first 4 conference room. You don't print to it, you don't, you have permissions. Surprised you don't have permissions.
So I saw a claim today where he was thinking about partially moving the parking in front of the treatment. So there's two
You better.
Well,
Oh,
since I'm running this
man, it
long,
took until 10
I'm gonna
o'clock
pass
last
these back
night.
out.
I had
If
to
you
go
want
to
the
bed
corrections,
early.
I can make them on the
I
fly.
got consolidated at noon, like maybe 12, 15.
As you're coming around, grab yours out of the pile.
That way, if I've misinterpreted, or if you need to make a correction, I can make it on the fly.
Take yours, pass it around. Take one down, pass it around.
Take somebody else.
Take someone else's,
Barrel.
yeah. We'll see what else, someone else will say.
I wanna spend all the money. I mean, I wanna fund. Oh, nice. Well, I would love to, but
I think we can just, thanks, thank you.
Nice chicken scratch.
I can't help it,
See, it's not legible. All right.
I've never been allowed to spend more money than is in the budget.
Yeah, it's hard to
So it
do.
has to
Five
balance.
other money.
I can't do that either.
This is what I thought I was getting. Thank you.
Look at that.
Take one and pass it on.
We'll wait for the sales.
No, you're supposed to say, take one down and pass it around.
No, whatever. I think she understood. See.
It's only off 200.
You guys should be good to
I just feel like we have to do
Yeah.
this street projects. Why didn't
Uh,
Well, we have to design it for sure, and eventually we have to do it. I was just trying to,
defer it?
well, I guess I'll explain my logic when we, if they're gonna, are we gonna
Yeah,
explain
I
our
think that's a
logic?
good segue. Why don't we go around there and kind of explain your logic, and then we'll look for the commonalities, which I think we're all seeing some in here, so. Let's start, well, Councilor Bowman, why don't you go first since
Okay.
you're ready.
So, again, for me, just in my history, I've always had to stay within my budget. There's not extra money, and so, my logic was I was looking at cost avoidance, safety, and efficiency. And so as I looked at this, cost avoidance for me, and because it has been avoided for so long, the 160 for the windows and the ceiling and painting here on City Hall needs to be done. That's only gonna get more expensive, and it sounds like it hasn't been done in quite a while. The City Hall windows, to me, are a big safety issue when they fracture like that. I mean, we're lucky that Carmen didn't get hurt, so I think that's safety. And then I went down to the autonomous mower, and based on my experience, although that might be new technology to the city, that is not really new technology, so that's cost avoidance, and that is an efficiency metric that you can get. It's paid off in 3.75 years, and I think it'll run right up to the 10-year, and within that period of time, it will pay for itself for at least 6 years, 5.5 years, and then looking at that, based on that technology, as smart as the people are in the shop here, not that you can steal that technology, I'd be happy to volunteer my time to show them how to do that with their own mowers if we bought another mower, and it's not that hard to do. So then I went with cameras at the senior center. I think that's a potential cost avoidance for falls and trips and safety. So I went with those cameras. And then I thought that Hunt Avenue to the design has to be done. We need to at least get the design out of the way, again, knowing that everything, the costs continue to rise. So I didn't throw in the construction. Eventually, you know, we're gonna have to do that. And then for safety, I went with the accelerate the police officer. I truly believe we gotta get that out there and get that person coming in, because there's items we have to order for that person to do their job. And then the radios, I feel that's very key. We could get hit at any time with a huge issue, and so the radios in regards to safety is key. So I think mine totaled up at 732,308. I took 130,306 from the Council Strategic Reserve, which brought us down to 294,694. Listening to what Cassandra has said, which take on average, you know, 350 a year we get, so the next year it'd bump us back up. So that was kind of my thought, cost avoidance, safety, and efficiency. That was my logic, and I just stuck to that criteria all the way down.
Let's go next.
I'll go next. Okay, so I obviously have highest amount there because I really truly believe in cameras and all of that. So I wanted all the cameras in, as many as possible. And so I said yes to all of them. But I also think and I'm the only one who selected the Hunt construction and the sidewalk repair for West Valley. I'm just thinking about if something happens and, it fails, then not only, there are a lot of people who depend on those roads and or those sidewalks or whatever. And I don't know, that worries me that that is just going to be lingering and could fail at any minute. I truly believe in having another police officer. And so my total is at 2.8 million. And so I pulled money out of the general fund balance, $1 million plus an additional 385 from council strategic reserve, as well as 800,000 for the transportation benefit district. And that leaves me at almost 2.8 million.
You're a shopper.
I am.
I guess I'm next. So city hall maintenance and sealing and painting, I know brick, the longer you last, you let it go quicker, it adds moss and deterioration, so I figured we just get the building done. And then the camera work, I've been around here a while, so I know how, it only takes one vandalism, one trip, one fall, one something that you don't have a camera witnessing that, so I think that's just a help. I'm a little off on the autonomous mower, but if it saves, then it pays for itself in 3.5 years, basically. It could be a good idea. The senior center camera, also for the same reason, the chip seal, I think we should continue to do. They really add length to our streets. I hate to see how expensive the overlays are and stuff, but at least chip seal will help. The building reserve for when emergency comes up, I added that 100. And then the thing I did different was the utility tax. I think if we do 1% now, that gives us for later on, 3-4 years down the road. And I was 10 grand over. Which we could get out of the strategic reserves.
Okay. Are you guys going or just, are we at me?
Actually, we're at council.
No, we're still in the middle.
This is your budget.
I don't,
There you go. I'll go. Okay,
I was
So-
proud of mine,
I agree.
just
I
saying.
actually had two different things. I actually was like, if I had like a $710,000 budget without the transportation benefit district, so I kind of had it side, but it doesn't show up here. But anyway, so a lot of the stuff that I said were things I really wanted to do with the $600,000. The city hall and the windows, I think those are nice just to get those taken care of. This increase significant. I think the Hunt Avenue design needs to get done, and the police officer. Those are the 1, 2, 3, 4 that I've had that I thought were really essential to do. If we did an increase any of the revenues, and then if we include, assuming we did the transportation benefit district, 800,000. I think if I did the utility tax, I would do it in 27, 28. Because if I remember right, the utility taxes are going up the next couple of years. They just went up really steep, and then it's going to even out. So I feel like we had a pretty big increase on our tax rate. We're doing that study, I feel like a couple weeks ago, and it goes up. It went up the last couple of years really steep, and it's going to go down to 4% or whatever a year. I feel like that was similar.
Of the utility rates.
Rates, not
Utility rate,
taxes.
the rate just went up, and so I'd rather wait till 27, 28 to increase the taxes, so that utilities, they have a little bit more of an even. So that's why I prefer the tax benefit district. But with the district, I really wanted to emphasize I put the chip seal program, the overlay program, the building reserves, 100,000 a year, and then for the increase in the street maps. So I added all of those in addition, and I think that just to Cole's point, I think those reserve items provide a cushion. So if we all of a sudden need to do the Hunt one, we get the design done, ready to go, we're moving forward on it, and we have the money, but it's not allocated to a specific project, but it is putting that similar amount of money in that fund. So, so that was kind of my reasoning, is just to try to say, hey, if we didn't do the benefit district, those are the 4 things I think were really important. If we did it, I think we definitely put all the money into the reserve funds for mostly streets. And then, I think that covers everything.
Councilmember Alfred, if you look at the screen, I think I captured what you're saying with the transportation benefit district with the highlights.
Yes.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah, 'cause I was like, I don't know if that's, I think to me, the street needs, we're looking at that number going upside down in a couple of years, and to me, that's where we were getting ahead of it. And, I think the street cost is going up, so to me, that's a pretty minimal tax increase, I don't think people feel it a ton, and I think it's a big chunk of money, and we get it going right away, and then we get, and this is, like I said, it's not allocating to a project as much as just allocating, like, we just need to get, it just, it's shutting down, so.
Right.
That's my thought.
So for me, the city hall windows definitely need to be done. And then I think cameras probably should be at all parks, but at least over here at Loyalty. Because I notice a lot of kids hanging around those bathrooms. I don't know how much vandalism is happening there, but they always, it just kind of makes me wonder about that. And then I like the idea of the autonomous mower and cameras at the mausoleum. And then I had money left over because I didn't add
It
it
was her
all up.
birthday.
Yeah.
Rainy day fund.
So I would go ahead and put cameras at the senior center because I think that's an important thing, especially if you're having people fall. And then Hunt Avenue design, I'd go for that. And then the 250 for chip seal. And the police officer, I think, I mean, it's such a challenge to get that the police all hired, and then just to have that extra position is real important. And then initially I thought, well, we could maybe get the radios for 20,000, but I'm putting it back up to 100,000. And then I would put building reserves at 70,000. And I think that should come close to what my 1 point.
Sounds to me, okay. So I did do the city hall windows and the ceiling. I think maintenance is rather important, kind of in the position we're at now. And I guess I don't wanna be a council member that's on there that neglects the maintenance of buildings. Just because I've seen what's happened in the fire service and, well, I mean.
I didn't mean it in a negative.
Not on my,
fact.
not on my watch.
I think we all know. I mean, you can see what East Pierce is doing right now with their fire station. They have to pass an $80 million bond to get the stations they're getting. And that happened in 18 and they only got one station open so far, so. It's important to keep the maintenance up. So I was for that. The cameras I did do for Rainier View and Loyalty, I think they're the busier, the parks, to start with those two. Whenever there's vandalism at Loyalty, I know I hear about it from my grandkids when the merry-go-round's broke or the swing or something, it's, you know, and it's just what we live in today. I am for the autonomous mower. I think it's a good investment. I also put down cameras for the senior center as far as just safety and any liability on the city for falls, whatever, and vandalism. I kept the accelerated police officer, thinking about the survey that we did, the community survey. Was public safety is number one. I think, like Barbara said, it's hard to get officers, so getting them early and getting them as soon as we can, I think, is best. The radios I'm for. I know I've got, you know, some background in communications and emergencies, and if you can't communicate, you're screwed. So I think the 800 megahertz is appropriate. That's basically it. I would like to put money in the reserve for building reserves, but I didn't. So mine came up to about 595 with 5,000 left, just out of the 600 that I had to spend. I didn't go into any other kind of revenues or council strategic reserves or whatever yet. I figured I'd save that, so that's mine.
Can I ask one question before I go?
Yeah.
You're gonna do the
No, I'm not
show.
going.
Oh.
Wait, what?
Wow.
No.
I was just curious on the cameras. I was just curious. The reason I didn't say anything about the cameras that people have mentioned a lot is because I feel like we've done cameras at some of our properties and we've been a direct correlation between those crimes. There's people, I mean, specifically in Seattle, we had cameras and we caught people doing stuff. And the police came out and it wasn't very helpful in deterring crime. So sometimes we just took out a fake camera and that had some deterrent of the people that were worried about it. And then so to me, the camera thing, I didn't pick it because not because I don't think that the crime is not a big deal, but I just don't know how effective they are, and sometimes they create more liability, because you have cameras, now you have to keep track of it, and so if you keep it too late, so to me, like, it's a little, the camera thing is, it's almost, I was debating it, but I really think that I would like to see a little more information on the cameras, because I could be persuaded, but I just don't know that there's a correlation between cameras and less crime. I think that some people right now are just like, you can't arrest me, so I'm gonna do it anyway, and we saw that, and it was really discouraging, so that's my only thought on the camera thing, so.
My camera thing is more of a liability, because again, being here so long, it only takes one
Lost.
trip ball. And if you have it, then you can at least have some.
So on that side of it, yeah.
But yeah, you're gonna get vandalism, but it helps if you have a camera that's working, so I mean, that's why I choose.
So we have historically just had a camera at the skate park. The technology has drastically improved from what is there to what these will be. It will give us the ability to record and store data easier, longer, obviously better image quality, pan, tilt, zoom, all of that stuff. So it really kind of enhances our camera program that we've had in the past. What we had at the skate park, I think sometimes would or would not deter people. It would allow us to help identify people that were there goofing off and doing something they shouldn't be doing at the skate park, so we could send someone down there and it's that person in the black jacket, and the officer could go down and talk to him. Really, the idea was looking at taking some of the cameras that we are putting here at City Hall and at our other city facilities and outfitting the parks as well. So that's kind of where that came from. And this was a request from the Parks Department, from Derek. That's where the cameras came from. They would end up, I think, ultimately in the IT budget, but it was a parks request.
So I see some commonalities, obviously. I mean, I think maybe, Cassandra, would you mind just adding a column or put an L or something? Wherever you want to put it. So what I'm hearing from everybody is obviously City Hall windows. Councilmember Botetto and Cole, was there a reason why you didn't want to do the paint? What was your?
For me, I just thought it could be deferred, that's all. I thought the windows absolutely needed to be taken care of and to defer the extra 100,000, but I could change that.
I could be convinced. I mean,
Yes.
I was also looking at, I wanted to spend money other ways.
Okay.
So that was, but I would be fine if you.
Let's put it in there because a majority have said that.
That makes sense.
The other thing that a majority of people point out was the autonomous mower. The senior center camera. It's Avenue design. Chip seal. Patrol officer. Radios was a 50-50, so we'll put that one on there. And building reserves and street match, I'm gonna hold off on because Andy, yours was contingent on TBD. So what does that give us, Cassandra? I did not read that, I don't know if anybody else can.
8306.
I could read it.
Barely read the thing in front of me here. Before we start making this thing balance, what are council's thoughts on new revenue? Particularly looking at streets, right? Those are your big dollar items here. Is there interest of council to consider, not now, but sometime next year, something like a TBD?
I
You
would,
want more information on it, I guess, is really the question.
yes.
Yes, you do it, or yes, you want more?
Yes, I want more information, both.
Yeah.
Okay.
Definitely consider it, and I want more information.
Okay.
Is that a no? I thought you said no, Carla.
No, I said yes.
Okay.
Yes, I'm interested.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that, we knew you did not have enough information or time to even process the potential TBD, but when you look at some of these street things like chip seal and overlay programs, this is a good example of if you do not pay for that out of new revenue, you don't have revenue in the future to sustain a 15-year chip seal, right? So I would caution council that you may not want to fund chip seal this year unless you can do it and sustain it, right? You can fund it at the 30-year model that you're at, but you may not want to go up to 15-year if you can only cover it for this biennium. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Wait, I'm not sure it does to me. So hold on. So you're saying we should be careful about funding it because until we have something like a TBD in effect?
You can continue to fund it at what you're doing already, which is a 30-year cycle, but I would not get it back onto a 15-year cycle unless you have dedicated revenue. Because otherwise, what you are doing is when you go back to that financial model, you're just making those lines cross even faster.
The $250,000 listed on this exercise is in addition to what's currently programmed into the budget. So the existing budget, as was already provided, includes funding at the 30-year cycle. So this is on top of that.
So the 250 brings it to a 15-year cycle?
15.
Yes.
But we'd have to maintain that each year,
Exactly.
The whole thing?
Mhm,
Yeah.
the whole
And well,
250.
Well, 250 plus the existing, yeah.
Yeah.
You're right.
So it's really 500
Yeah.
a biennium, 250 a year. And that's today's costs, but you know, I doubt oil's gonna get cheaper, I doubt chips are gonna get cheaper.
Chips.
It's like the chips of
Doritos.
Of rock,
cheaper.
rock
Chips of
chips.
Doritos might be kind of store brand.
I've heard Cheetos are really good to crunch up and roll stuff.
So that's my only caution to council. If you want to fund, get us on a 30-year for this biennium, you're more than welcome to do that, but it's not sustainable.
15, yeah.
Yeah, sorry, it's on a 15-year. It's not sustainable unless you're willing to say, yep, let's do this and we want to talk about TBD next year or find some other revenue source. Otherwise, we're doing nothing but making our problems worse in out years.
We had a lot of support for the TBD, but I think what you're saying is take it off the budget for now, which gets us closer to the 600 if we just take it off that 250. And then work on the TBD and then include it when we do that. Is that what you're saying? As a
That
budget
would be-
amendment, kind of, more like mechanically how
You
you do
know,
it?
yeah, you could always add it back in. One thing that you might want to consider is having us come back to you early next year with the TBD. TBDs don't have to start January 1st. If you get information in January, February, and you're like, yeah, we should be doing this, we can start at the beginning of any quarter. Right, so it could start July 1st. So think about that, instead of 800,000 next year, if you started July 1st, it'd be roughly 400,000 next year. Which then would fund this. I think you have long-term challenges when it comes to Hunt Avenue. And what's next? There will be other streets. These neighborhood streets are not grant eligible. You're gonna have to find long-term solutions for some of the worst streets. Same with the sidewalks, right? You know, at some point, you know, there might be a temporary fix, like you're suggesting, Councilmember Clark, but at some point, West Valley, it might have to be part of a West Valley Highway project. The nice thing about West Valley is it is grant eligible, right? Sidewalks may not be, but the rest of the project might be.
I think what you're talking about with the lines crossing, to me, that's an argument to put it in the budget because it puts pressure on us to decide on that extra revenue. Because to me, that 15-year chip seal thing makes it so you don't have more Hunt Avenues. So I feel like that, to me, I think that the lines are, if you don't cross the lines, you're just deferring things that are gonna come up later. So I feel like the cost of maintaining is so much more important sooner so that you don't have more Hunt Avenues. So to me, that putting it in and making the budget tight is valuable because you're having to say like, hey, the cost of things have gone up and now we can recognize it in real time instead of like, oh no, in 5 years, we're like, so we need a 5 million, we have all this money, we're short, and that, I don't like the panic, so I'd rather just put the maintenance now, solve it before it gets to be urgent, so that taxpayers can feel like a general. Just to me, it's a lot more gentle on taxpayers when you say, hey, this is coming up, we're gonna put reserves on it, we know the costs have increased. We're not gonna have, we wanna keep the Hunt Avenues down, so that's my opinion on that.
Like Hunt Avenue, that area of Sumner kind of been ignored, it seems. I mean, I don't know, in years past, you know, when they're talking about the parking garage and proposed development over there, is that still something that's kind of on the books, that, or the idea that there would be higher density?
It's gotta be developed, it's really hard.
And
Yeah.
would those developers need to make the road?
Yeah, so that, you're absolutely right, that area is in our town center plan, it is zoned for much higher density, I believe that's all 6 stories if I recall right.
Yeah.
As things get developed, developers would need to bring the roadway up to current right-of-way standard, you know, width as well as sidewalks, curb gutter, et cetera. I think the challenge is, you don't have one single property owner that has assembled a lot that's not already, you know, developed in a commercial type use. Okay, Sunset, right, they have their property all assembled and they're using it that way, but we haven't seen anybody else come in and say, oh, I'm gonna start buying up single family residences to do that type of development. Yeah, it's hard to do. Yeah. So I don't know how realistic it is time wise.
Could make the argument that by doing Hunt Avenue, it makes that cheaper for someone to acquire because then they don't have to do the improvements, we've already done it for them. So that might spur that development.
It's true.
Like a chicken and the egg.
Hunt Avenue is not going away. Right.
It's just, I'm just shocked how much for 2 or 3 blocks, you know, the cost is. Yeah. It's just kind of.
Me too.
I think we all are. Andy, I think you brought up a good point, you know, putting it in does force the issue in more time, in that manner.
Yeah, it's more like, when do you need it versus, like I said, with the city hall, I don't know if you'd be spending 500,000 on windows if you spent 50,000 a year on maintenance, you know, there are certain things. And I don't know how many years that was, maybe it would have been 15,000 in maintenance 10 years, 20 years ago, and just kind of, I don't know, maybe just be replacing windows and not replacing seals and jams, and a lot of that stuff seems like it's preventable, some of the stuff is preventable, not all of it, but.
But most of it is preventative maintenance is what we're having to, the lack of preventative maintenance is why money is being spent today.
Yeah.
Right, so I agree with you, although I didn't have it in there, the chip seal program. Definitely we have to do that design, but anything we can do preventative maintenance on, we should. It'll be pay now, pay later. And pay more later.
I do think there's some value looking at the design of Hunt Avenue now, right? That helps at least get on the shelf, it'll help refine our construction scope.
Yep.
And our costs.
Yeah.
Not gonna go away, there's still no funding there, but
Don't know what we're in for.
you'll know what you're in for. Looking at Mr. Johnstone back there, you good with that? Like, that statement that I made, not.
I am, and I just wanna point out, I really appreciate the conversation here. I think the important thing, one other important note is to definitely keep in mind that Hunt is a great example of what happens when we continue to defer maintenance. And so it really does point back to the important point that funding the preventative maintenance programs are so important and vital to making sure that we don't see our roads getting to that state. So appreciate the conversation.
And are there other streets in the city that we should be looking at now, so that when the next council or next 5 years or 10 years, that we're going, oh, here's this street that we really should have been looking at, so. I mean, I just wonder.
Yeah, so obviously we are looking at how our pavement condition scores. And we actually, when you look at a mapping of our latest pavement condition scores, we are doing a really great job here of keeping up with and keeping the life of our pavement extended. We do have a few roads that are starting to get into that category like Hunt that we need to be taking a look at. There's 5 levels of scoring and there's numbers associated with better than 90 points that or better than a 90% score and so on. I usually think of it as A, B, C, D, and F, just like we got the grades we got in school.
Right.
And we've got 3 or 4 roads in the F category. And we've got 3 or 4 in the D category, Hunt being one of those. But generally speaking, many, many miles of our roadways in town are A's and B's. And we've been doing a really good job. The important point to remember in that though is that if we continue to defer that, eventually all those A's and B's start to become C's and D's. And then that gets expensive to catch up on. So it's there are always candidates. We're always keeping an eye on that, tracking the scoring, and we will move projects forward as needed in order to take care of those.
Good.
So with that in mind, what do you think about chip seal?
So how much is in the budget now for new?
250.
250.
250?
So we're doubling it, so we'd
Yes.
match it.
I'm sorry?
We would match it,
Yes. So the current budget includes $250,000, which maintains the 30-year cycle. In order to move to a 15-year cycle would require the additional $250,000.
I would probably buy into that. And although I think that I understand what you're saying about people getting hit with the utility tax, but again, being a person that lives in here, I mean, and understanding what it takes to keep the city going, I would say that we would look at the TBD and understand that. And then I think right on the heels of it, if that's what we agree to, I think we need to really look at that utility tax and know exactly when we're gonna put that out there. And just bring that right in behind, the transportation benefit district. Whatever that, or something that we could do is put it out to a vote and go higher. Isn't that the one we could do that on? That somebody did 3%, but they put it to a vote?
Yeah,
Maybe that's something we would put to a vote, and if it doesn't pass, then we go with what we can do without the vote. And go the 1%.
Be a little cautious about putting it out to a vote, especially, well, we'll see after next week.
Well, I
mean,
understand
just-
that,
yeah,
but that's something that,
But if they understand why we really are asking,
yes.
yeah.
And I think the other thing I'm really trying to stay in tune with, there are a lot of young families moving down here from up north, just kind of watching it, and I think that they move here because of the schools, they move here because of the town. And what, I will just use myself, what to me feels expensive, to them is nothing. They'll make a $3,500 house payment, because that's all they've ever known.
Yeah.
I'm cringing if it's over 1,200.
Yeah.
Right, because of where I'm at in the life cycle. So, I mean, it's just, maybe we can kind of, do we keep track of our demographics here in town? So
Absolutely.
I think we could look at the demographics to see the average age, who has kids, where they're located at, and then we could kind of put it out there, right?
And I always think the most important thing, if you're considering putting something out to any kind of a vote, is just being sure that you have a solid plan so that what you're asking people to pay, they know what they're getting for it. Not just, it's not an open checkbook. This is what we're asking for. This is specifically what
Right.
we're asking you to fund.
Right.
So I think that's always an important component as well.
I like the idea of, like you said, that I think the transportation benefit thing now, and then by the time we get to next year, I think that's when the rates for utilities start evening out. So to me, there is a way to kind of say, hey, we gotta keep up, doing it in a way that doesn't shock anybody.
These are non-formal terms. You kind of feather it in,
Feather it in.
right? So you feather it in so people aren't going,
And then the other question I have is on the transportation benefit district, is it 1% forever, or is it 1% like every couple of years, or how does that work, the council managing portion?
So it's 1/10 of 1%, so it's
Period.
0.1%, and it's good for 10 years. You have to renew it every 10 years.
So you renew it, so you can't go like 0.1%, a couple years later, 0.1%.
No.
It's just-
Keep
it's-
increasing.
So anything over that is.
Has to be
is
voted.
okay.
And, I think you can't lose sight of how much street maintenance and capital costs are already being paid out of the general fund. So you have 800,000, right, of this type of stuff, an overlay program, increased chip seal and a little bit of capital, you have all that and more that's already being paid out of the general fund. So if you were to put it out to voters, that does allow you then to shift some of that general fund dollars into a transportation benefit district funding, and then frees up money to continue to support your existing general fund services like police and parks, right? There's a lot of different ways to slice this, and I don't know the right way or what council is going to desire. I just want to caution you that you don't want to commit to something for one biennium that you can't continue.
Cause it's over and above.
Exactly.
A lot of this is over and above, and so how do you keep the over and above going? Cause you can't on the existing, so what's gonna now balance that over and above?
Exactly.
In layman's terms, that's what my brain.
And for the 2025-26 budget ordinance, just from the kind of mechanical aspect, I have to be able to balance it. We don't have a TBD in place. You know, that's something that staff may be asked to look at in 2025. So it's not a revenue that I could plug into the budget right now. So if that would be council's wishes in 25, it would come in form of a budget amendment. But for the 25-26 budget ordinance, if our expenditures are going to exceed the revenues, I'll need to plug that with use of fund balance or one of these other revenue sources that we have available to us.
Right, so
Just from the mechanics.
it really, that's why it had to balance out based on existing funds.
Yes.
So as it stands with the column that you put in there, we're $380,000.
Yes.
Unless we took it from the council strategic reserve, which we don't wanna do.
It's up to you.
If we did a budget amendment,
With rain chairs.
I like that, strategic reserve, so if we did it that way, we could budget it that way, and then when we did the TBD, we'd move it out of that and get it back? Is that how we could do it? If you needed to balance it, is that something we could decide to?
Yes.
Be like, cause I don't like using that money, I like it for like,
Me too.
if we get a deal on radios, I'd rather use it for that council, where, hey, we found a deal, let's go buy them right now, let's use the council strategic reserve, we get them for 50 grand and we get them a lot cheaper, that's a good, to me, that's a good program. The cameras, to me, I think those are like, oh, we you know, something like that, where you're like, they're littler things and you can just do them like, those, maybe not cameras, I don't know, that's the wrong. Anyways, I'm just thinking about that, that would be an option.
The other thing with radios, you know, I just want to throw out, all of our police radios are also gonna be nearing end of life in the next, I think it's 3 years. We've been setting aside money to replace those radios, right? We've been doing that since we switched to the 800 network, which is great. Not all of the other jurisdictions in the county have been that looking forward, and they have not been doing that. So there's this big thing that's gonna happen in the county here in the next 2 to 3 years, where all these radios are gonna each reach end of life. And then the question is going to come, and Mayor Hayden gets to sit on South Side 911, so she hears a lot about police radios, of who pays to replace those radios? Does South Sound 911 or City of Tacoma or City of Puyallup? There's other funds out there that might be able to replace those public safety in-service or police and fire radios. And if we can enjoy that benefit, maybe we also then have that radio reserve fund that we've been squirreling away to buy these radios. There's so many moving pieces with radios, it may be worth sitting back just for a little bit and getting a better lay of the land over the next 6 months to a year, because there's gonna be a lot of political changes at the county level. And at South Sound 911,
Every week, every month they argue about radios.
that could benefit us by waiting.
But we can't allocate it, doesn't mean we have to spend it.
Exactly.
We just allocate and
Yep.
say, this is the intent. But then if that comes to fruition, then that money goes somewhere else.
Yep. Could do that.
But you have to allocate critical things, in my mind.
It's kind of a worst case scenario.
Mhm.
Worst case scenario, we've got $100,000 there, we
Mhm.
can spend that on radios, but maybe we could not have to do it.
Another-
Spend less or spend nothing.
Another creative thing you could do to help balance your budget is, I know you wanna accelerate that police officer, but what if you accelerate it to July 1 instead of January one. So that's probably more realistic for staffing, right? So then that cuts that 172 in half,
Very realistic for staffing.
right? So that's another 85,000 that maybe you put towards radios instead of police officers having, because the reality is that's probably with retirements and things, we'd be lucky to be at full staff by July one.
But do we have to, when that officer comes, do we have everything that they need on hand? So they could start day one, yes or no?
No,
No, we
So
have to
where does
order it.
that money come from?
It's already budgeted.
Okay.
It's
Budgeted in 26, so it would just move forward to 25. And yeah, there's no way that we would be able to add this additional officer by January 1st. I mean,
So that's the reality, so
the
there's
reality
an
is
excess in there
that's 2
cut it in
months. It's
half.
not gonna happen.
and let me just talk about vehicles real quick.
Those are backlogged.
I have 5 new police cars sitting at our shops right now.
Waiting
It's
for
up
the
to
parts.
6 months to get upfitted right now.
Mhm.
That's how the supply chain is still hurting us and skilled labor is still hurting us. So we have new police cars that we can't put in service right now. So the length of time to accelerate that vehicle for that officer is also a factor in this.
But if we found one and hired them, could they do something even though we have 5 vehicles sitting over
If
there?
we hire an entry level, they're gonna be not on the
Training and
road
all that
for
stuff.
14 months.
Yeah, a year.
Yeah, there's definitely a ability to keep them busy.
So I reduced that line item,
Which one?
accelerating the police officer. So if I reduce that by half, essentially saying it's a 7-1 funding, that brings the shortfall to 294.
So then the question is, do we go with that budget? And then if we do go with that budget, do we put it to fund balance or to this council reserve? Is that?
That's your question.
That's your question.
What I mean, that's.
Or-
Well,
or
while we
change it
decide.
again.
Or we go left,
Or you
change.
change it again.
Change it. No.
I think I.
Would you say 290?
294.
Is the.
So
is the
roughly
deficit.
300,000.
I'd prefer, I think fund balance is easier. I still don't like using that reserve.
If we still have the radios in there, that's
Yeah.
something to think about, given what Jason just said about there possibly being a, oh, but you talked about police radios, not those.
He's talking about maybe new.
So many changes that are coming with radios.
Mhm.
If the property tax, the established South Sound 911 pays for radios, and it's a big if, it's a policy decision by the South Sound 911 board and the radio network owners, but if that was to happen, then the money that we've been putting into replacement reserves would all of a sudden become available.
It's kind of risky to
It's a
me.
risk.
It's a risk.
Yeah, I like keeping it in there, like I think you're, cause it shows our priorities, and I think that is a priority, and if we don't spend it and we get it later, we can do an adjustment.
So to Andy's point, if we took the $300,000 out of the general fund balance, what's the negative impact of that?
Not much, I mean, your general fund, is well over your financial policies of 8%. We've been talking for a while now that we probably need to look at those financial policies and increase that operating reserve to, 12 to 16%, but even doing so, you'd have plenty in your general fund balance.
So I would probably vote for that, take it out of the general fund balance to make this balance.
But we need to look at that TBD or something,
Yeah, I think,
because it's not gonna last.
For sure.
I'd rather get that on the.
If we could do
uh,
something
first-
like that.
I think quarter one, I think we try to get it going like April 1st, in my opinion.
As soon as we can.
I think, I mean, January one's fine, I feel like you're not gonna get as much spending January as you are in December. I'm sure that takes a little bit of time. How long does it take to get something like that going?
The council manic is relatively simple, I think we have to give DOR 60 days
I
notice.
believe it's a 60-day notice.
60 notice on but a voter is
Longer.
longer, 'cause you have to work with the auditor, get it on the election, there's costs associated with
Which
that.
is probably the soonest we could do it if we decided we liked it.
Is it April?
I'm assuming, yeah, cause we're past the January 1st, we're almost
Yeah,
60
I
days,
mean-
we're not gonna get it.
April
Must
1st
only pay
might
to
still
put-
even be tight by the time we brought for
Public
council,
hearing and stuff like that.
right, for all of that, and then to give
We
DOR
also have to
notice.
pay to put something on the ballot, right?
Yeah, it's
Costs
expensive to
money.
market that a little bit, yeah.
Yes.
If you wanna do the voter, if you just
Yeah,
wanna do a
voter.
council manic, it's,
I think we
Okay.
would probably target 6-1.
Oh, 6-1 there.
I'm so sorry, 7-1.
Seven.
That's probably the realistic
Yeah.
timeframe.
So is the 300,000 with that 800? The 300,000 shy with, no, so.
The 800's got not there, because we
Yeah,
don't have it.
exactly,
It's not
so
there, we
we're
don't-
300,000, so
And we're balanced.
where do we
Yes.
come that general fund balance done?
Mhm.
Okay.
And if we did it July 1st, we get 400, estimated 400 for the end of the year, and that wipes out the 3, so we kind of
Back,
And at that point, I would be coming before council with a budget amendment.
okay,
So to
all right.
kind of shake things up a little.
And the TBD is to help us maintain the 15-year program that we've been talking about, chip seal
Street
program.
maintenance.
That's the way I see
That's
it.
why we're looking at
Just
that.
yeah, you could do that, you could create an overlay program, you could also then backfill some of your existing street costs, which is
Right.
what I would probably encourage council to
Okay,
do to help
okay.
those lines not cross as
Right.
quick.
Right, okay.
Because right now, by allocating all of this, because where we came in saying, you know, you have about 860, we think you should go about 600. You've just done all that and more. We're on razor thin, right? Anything doesn't come out right,
Right,
we're gonna be coming back to you saying, what do you wanna do?
Yeah.
What services do you want to cut?
you're gonna
And
cut.
we say services, we mean things like chip seal
Yeah.
and sidewalks.
So
and-
800,000 in revenue, you've already got 250 of that added in expenditures for the chip seal. The idea would be not to add another, $450,000 more in expenditures to kind of use that 800,000 to balance off some of the things that are already in there.
May I just clarify, we have an $800,000 number on the transportation, but really it's 1.6 million because it's 800,000 annually, am I right? Is this for the biennium? So it'd end up being 1.2 million, so we'd end up, it'd be building up, so I think, yeah, okay, that's good to, I was just thinking about that.
Good, thanks for that. Okay.
So what I'm hearing, let's just go through this if you don't mind, Cassandra.
Got it?
I can't read it.
I know that. I can't either.
I'm sure Jeff can read it.
I'll be over there.
I can, but I've got a terrible headache behind my eyes.
It looks like, we're talking city hall windows and paint,
Paint.
autonomous mower, senior center cameras, Hunt Avenue design, chip seal, half a year of a patrol officer, some money for radios.
And hope the other radio thing happens.
And then use 300,000 from general fund balance. And that leaves us in a net position for the biennium of $5,700.
Lunch.
Not bad.
Well, there's a little bit because we were at a net of right around 8. We allocated 6, so we've still got,
2 there.
Just about 2 there. Okay.
yes. Otherwise, 5,700, I would be squinchy.
Yes.
You would be
Good, I was
twitchy?
like,
So there's still some
Okay,
buffer
so-
there,
Mhm.
buffer there,
So it sounds like
couple hundred,
Sorry.
That's okay.
275.
270 something, yeah.
You say it was 270, Cassandra?
Yeah, so if we go back to where the financial model currently is, we had, I believe, like right around 870,000. And what we asked is, allocate 600,000 of that.
So the 270,
Is-
nobody saw.
Yes.
Got it. That's what my husband tries to do.
But
to
you
me,
only
it never
allocated
works.
900, so.
So we're still, yeah,
Still, you got a little bit of cushion in there.
otherwise I'd be sweating.
Yeah, me too.
Got it.
I'm already sweating.
So
That
Does
doesn't
that sound
we
good
go with
to everybody?
this, we will
Uh-huh.
rerun everything, we'll be
Okay.
moving forward, with property tax consideration on Monday.
Mhm.
Yeah, you already held your public hearing. Then we'll move into 2 public hearings on the budget, and then budget adoption on December 9th. And if we have a study session blocked out, if there's more questions, so if you have questions, please let us know if we really need that agenda item or not. We've talked a lot about budget, I don't know that we're going to need it, but if we do, we're happy to sit down and talk about it. Maybe we'll at least come back with the financial model again for you that night.
And remind us what we said.
Yeah.
Here's what you agreed to. Still good? Yes.
And then we will put it on our work plan for early Q1 to come back and educate about transportation benefit district and the options. Okay,
Sounds good.
any other questions? Cassandra, Jeff, any words of wisdom? Mayor, I'll turn it back over to you for wrapping us up.
Yeah, so, is everybody good? All right. I adjourn this meeting at 5:22.
Nice.
Thank everyone
Thank
very
you.
much for the
Thank you. This
conversation.
was
That was
great.
fun.
That was fun.
Was very interesting.
That was great.
I love it.
That was a great conversation. I very much appreciate it.
Budgets are fun.
Thank you.
Don't stroke that.
I love it.
There you go.
See,